The house had grown quieter over the years, not because of peace but because of absence. Amara moved through the rooms like a shadow that no one noticed, her footsteps soft, her presence softer. Ryan was always somewhere else, inside meetings, buried in reports, or half asleep on the couch with his phone glowing in his hand. She had forgotten the last time he'd really looked at her, not in passing, not out of habit, but in that way that used to make her feel alive. What used to be warmth between them had turned into polite coexistence. Every conversation felt like duty, every gesture, rehearsed. On the morning he missed their anniversary again, she didn't cry or complain. She just stared at the flowers on the dining table, artificial, dust gathering at the edges, and thought about how much they resembled their marriage. She told him she needed a break, a few days away. He nodded, half listening, eyes still on an incoming email. There was no question, no resistance, no fear of losing her. That silence said everything she had tried to ignore for years. By the end of the week, Amara was on a flight to the coast, not for escape, but to remember what it felt like to breathe. The hotel was quiet, the sea vast and indifferent. She liked that. Here, she could exist without being someone's wife, without pretending to be fine. Days blended softly, mornings spent by the water, afternoons with coffee and books she barely read, nights spent staring at the horizon. The loneliness was still there, but it felt lighter when it wasn't shared. That was where she first saw him, Ethan. He wasn't remarkable at first glance, just another traveler with salt in his hair and a book in his hand. But there was something about his calm, an ease that contrasted sharply with Ryan's restless focus. They crossed paths at breakfast, at the lobby, on the beach. Each time, a nod became a greeting, then a brief exchange. His voice carried warmth that didn't demand attention. He asked simple questions and listened as if every answer mattered. It startled her, how easy it felt to speak without guarding her words. One evening, she found him sitting near the rocks, sketching the sunset. He gestured for her to join. They talked, not about love or loneliness, but about nothing and everything, places they had seen, books they never finished, moments they regretted not holding on to. She found herself laughing at things that weren't funny, realizing she hadn't laughed that way in years. He didn't flirt, didn't cross lines, just listened with a kind of focus that made her forget she was married. Over the next few days, the familiarity grew like a quiet rhythm. A shared coffee, a walk along the beach, a conversation that lingered too long. She began to notice small things, how his eyes caught the light, how his silence wasn't awkward but peaceful, how his presence filled the spaces inside her that had long gone hollow. Every evening ended with a goodbye that felt heavier than the last. Amara told herself it was harmless, two lonely people sharing air in the same place. But her heart knew better. It was the way her pulse quickened when he smiled, the way her thoughts drifted to him even when he wasn't near. She didn't plan it, she didn't want it. But desire doesn't ask for permission, it seeps quietly into cracks left open by neglect. One night, the ocean was particularly still, the sky a deep, endless blue. They walked without speaking, the sound of the waves the only thing between them. When his hand brushed against hers, she didn't move away. The world seemed to pause. Her breath caught, her body tense with both fear and longing. He didn't pull her closer, just looked at her as if asking a question he didn't need to speak. For a moment, everything inside her warped, loyalty, guilt, loneliness, need. Then she looked away, stepping back, but her silence betrayed her. Back in her room, she stared at her reflection, heart still racing. It wasn't love she felt, it was recognition. Someone had finally seen her again. That realization scared her more than the temptation itself. She told herself it would end when she returned home, that she would never see him again, that it was only a passing moment. But even then, deep down, she knew something inside her had already shifted. The woman who arrived at that resort was not the same one staring into the mirror now. She didn't know what she was searching for anymore, freedom, affection, or just proof that she was still capable of feeling something real. As the night deepened, Amara lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the sea beyond her window. Somewhere out there, she knew Ethan was probably awake too. And though nothing had happened yet, everything already had. The morning air was heavier than usual, and Amara could feel the weight of the night before pressing against her chest. She tried to distract herself with long walks and late breakfasts, pretending the quiet tension between her and Ethan didn't exist. But it followed her everywhere, silent and persistent, like the sound of the sea that never really stopped. Every time their paths crossed, her pulse betrayed her. She wanted to avoid him, to protect the fragile line she had drawn, but something stronger kept pulling her closer. She told herself it was harmless companionship, that she just needed someone to talk to, someone who would listen without judgment. But she knew how lies worked. The smallest ones always led to the ones you couldn't come back from. When it rained that afternoon, she found herself caught near the garden cafe, and Ethan was there too, watching the storm with quiet calm. The moment felt too familiar, too easy. They talked under the shelter, words flowing effortlessly, laughter breaking through the sound of the rain. When she finally looked at him, she saw not a stranger, but the comfort she had been chasing her entire marriage. That he didn't touch her. He didn't have to. The silence between them did all the speaking. She felt the pull, raw and unrelenting. Guilt whispered warnings, but loneliness drowned them out. That night, when she saw him again near the edge of the water, she didn't walk away. The wind carried the smell of salt and distance, and her resolve faltered. He looked at her like he could see every piece she had tried to hide, the exhaustion, the longing, the ache of being unseen. She didn't remember who moved first, only that it happened so quietly it almost felt inevitable. There were no promises, no declarations, no plans beyond the moment. What passed between them wasn't romance, it was need, stripped of logic and time. Her mind screamed to stop, but her body didn't listen. For a few fleeting hours, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, wanted, alive, seen. It was wrong, and yet in that instant, she couldn't find the strength to care. When it was over, she lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, her pulse slowing into a rhythm of disbelief. The sound of the ocean outside seemed to echo her thoughts, constant, unstoppable, merciless. Ethan didn't say much in the morning. His silence wasn't cold, it was understanding. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to promise or explain. He simply said, "Sometimes what heals us looks like a mistake first." She wanted to hate him for that, but the truth of it hit too deep. There was no drama in their parting, no drawn-out goodbye. Just two people walking away, both aware that something irreversible had been done. On the flight back home, Amara stared out the window, watching the clouds drift like soft barriers between her and what she had done. Her phone buzzed with messages from Ryan, short, practical ones asking about her return time. She typed replies that sounded like care but felt like performance. The closer she got to home, the heavier her chest became. She rehearsed her smile, practiced normalcy in her head, but the guilt sat quietly beneath her ribs, waiting to be noticed. When she finally stepped back into her house, Ryan greeted her warmly, arms open, eyes gentle in a way she hadn't seen in months. For a moment, she almost believed everything could go back to how it was. But when he hugged her, she froze. His embrace felt foreign, too pure for what she carried inside. She excused herself, claiming exhaustion, retreating to the shower as if water could wash away what she had done. The steam fogged the glass, her reflection fading in and out like someone she didn't recognize. She wanted to cry, but nothing came. The tears felt too small for the size of her sin. Days passed in practiced silence. Ryan was attentive, kind, maybe even trying again. It should have comforted her, but it didn't. Every gentle word only reminded her of what she had betrayed. She caught herself checking her phone, half expecting a message from Ethan that never came. It was better that way, she told herself, cleaner, easier to bury. But the absence left its own kind of wound. At night, she would lie awake beside her husband, eyes open in the dark, heart heavy with secrets. His breathing was steady, peaceful, unaware. She would stare at the ceiling and think about that night, not the act, but the silence before it, the stillness after it, the way it had felt to be seen for the wrong reason. Guilt didn't just haunt her, it reshaped her. It made her careful with words, deliberate with touch, hollow with kindness. She had crossed a line that couldn't be redrawn, and though nothing about her life looked different, everything inside her was. The laughter at work felt forced, the mirror less forgiving. She told herself she'd never see Ethan again, but the truth was she didn't need to. He was already part of her in ways she couldn't undo. The memory didn't fade, it just settled, like sand after a storm, quiet, hidden, but always there beneath the surface. Amara tried to move forward, to rebuild what she'd broken without anyone knowing it was cracked. She kissed her husband, she smiled in public, she pretended to be fine. But deep down, she knew something fundamental had shifted. Love and guilt had become indistinguishable. And though no one could see it, her heart carried the mark of that night, the one mistake that had felt like truth for a moment and punishment forever after. Weeks passed, but peace never came. Amara carried an unease she couldn't name, a quiet dread that grew heavier each morning. The smallest things began to change, her appetite, her energy, the faint nausea she tried to ignore. She blamed the stress, the guilt, the long hours of pretending everything was fine. But deep down, her body already knew what her mind refused to accept. When her period didn't come, denial was her first refuge. She counted days, then recounted them, each time hoping her memory had failed. It hadn't. The truth was forming quietly inside her, and with it came a fear she had never known before. She bought the test in secret, slipping it into her purse like contraband. Back home, she locked the bathroom door, heart thundering, hands trembling. The silence stretched as the minutes passed. When the result appeared, it was simple, undeniable, merciless. 2 lines. The room seemed to tilt, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and collapse. She stared at it for a long time, unable to cry, unable to think. Her mind raced through possibilities, none of them kind. The timeline didn't lie. It couldn't be ignored or explained away. The child growing inside her might not be Ryan's for the first time. Guilt wasn't abstract, it had form, consequence, heartbeat. Every breath became a question she couldn't answer. She sat on the bathroom floor, whispering to herself that it couldn't be true, that it must belong to her husband. But the math was cruel, and no amount of hope could change it. That night, she lay beside Ryan as he slept peacefully, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. She wanted to move, to escape his touch, to confess everything, but fear pinned her in place. One truth could destroy everything, yet silence was already killing her slowly. The following days blurred into mechanical routines. She went to work, smiled where she had to, pretended everything was normal. At night, she searched for answers online, trying to find reassurance in medical timelines that might shift blame toward safety. Nothing helped. Each new symptom only deepened her dread. The mirror became her enemy, reflecting a face she didn't recognize, a woman carrying a secret too heavy to hide. When Ryan noticed her fatigue, she lied easily, saying it was just stress. He believed her because he wanted to, because love makes denial simple. At her doctor's appointment, she clung to the small hope that maybe she was wrong. But the doctor's calm tone shattered it completely. The due date confirmed what she feared most, the timing didn't fit. Amara's breath hitched, her chest tightening as the truth settled into her bones. She nodded through the consultation, pretending to listen, but her mind was a blur of panic. When she stepped outside, the world felt unbearably bright, like everything had shifted without permission. That evening, she sat alone in the living room, the faint hum of the ceiling fan the only sound. Ryan was late again, caught up in meetings. She should have been angry, but part of her was relieved. His absence meant one more night without facing the decision that loomed over her. Confess or hide. Both paths led to ruin, just in different ways. The thought of losing him tore through her, but so did the thought of lying forever. She held her abdomen unconsciously, the weight of it no longer just emotional. The life growing inside her was innocent, yet born of betrayal. The next morning, Ryan left early, kissing her forehead with warmth she didn't deserve. As the door closed behind him, she broke. The tears came silently at first, then all at once. She wasn't crying for the mistake anymore, but for the woman she used to be before that mistake defined her. She thought about Ethan, not with longing, but with resentment for the simplicity he represented. He had walked away untouched, while she was left carrying everything that came after. She picked up her phone, opened their old messages, and found one still unread. It had been sent weeks ago. Hope you're okay. Sometimes the hardest truths grow inside us. She read it again and again until her vision blurred. Those words weren't just coincidence, and they felt like confession from a distance. For a fleeting second, she wanted to write back, to tell him what had happened, to share the unbearable weight. But she stopped herself. There was no comfort left in that connection, only consequence. She deleted the message instead, watching it vanish like it never existed, though nothing inside her was erased. When Ryan came home that evening, she tried to act normal. He cooked dinner, told her about his day, laughed at his own small jokes. She smiled where she was supposed to, hands resting protectively over her stomach beneath the table. Each word from him felt like a blade of kindness cutting deeper. He talked about their future, about taking time off work, about maybe starting a family soon. She nodded, swallowing the truth that was already living inside her. Later, as he slept beside her, she whispered into the darkness, "You deserve the truth. But not tonight." Her voice broke, but the silence didn't answer. She lay awake until morning, staring at the faint light creeping through the curtains, realizing that secrets don't just destroy relationships, they change people from the inside out. The following weeks would demand choices she wasn't ready to make. Whether she confessed or not, the truth would grow, one heartbeat at a time. And as she stood in front of the mirror, her reflection tired but calm, she understood something painful and permanent. Forgiveness might never come, but the consequence would never leave. The story she had been hiding had written itself inside her, and no matter how carefully she smiled, her eyes would always remember. Salamamara's world began shrinking into quiet rooms and practiced smiles. Each day felt heavier than the one before, as if the truth itself was gaining weight inside her. The pregnancy had moved beyond the stage of denial. Her body now carried proof she could no longer hide from. Ryan had started to notice small changes. He mentioned how her face seemed softer, her glow returning, his words drenched in innocent affection. Every compliment burned. She nodded, smiled, answered gently, and each time felt another part of her breaking. There were moments when she wanted to confess, to throw everything into the open and let the wreckage settle wherever it would. But the moment would pass, swallowed by fear, by the echo of his laughter, by the sight of his hands building the crib he thought was for their child. Her nights became long corridors of thought, pacing between confession and silence. In one version of her imagination, she saw herself telling him everything, his face falling, his trust dying in front of her eyes, years of love dissolving into disgust. In the other version, she saw herself carrying the secret to her grave, pretending long enough that maybe it would start to feel true. Neither choice offered peace. There was no forgiveness left for her, not from him, not from herself. The guilt had turned physical, pressing down on her chest every time he smiled. When she went for her next checkup, the doctor congratulated her gently, showing her the small flickering movement on the screen. That heartbeat should have brought joy, but it only deepened the silence in her soul. She felt two lives beating inside her, one new, one dying. As she walked home, she realized she had stopped praying, stopped hoping. Her faith had been replaced by routine. She cooked, cleaned, laughed when required, loved when necessary, and hated herself when alone. She no longer thought of Ethan, not in longing, not even in anger. He had become more memory than man, a ghost tied to a single mistake. Ryan began talking about the future with unshakable excitement. He painted pictures of family, of first steps, of laughter filling their quiet house again. Every word felt like mercy she didn't deserve. She caught herself studying him, wondering how long it would take for him to notice the truth behind her eyes. Sometimes, in moments of tenderness, she almost convinced herself that this was a second chance, that life had rewritten itself in her favor. But then a single thought would destroy it all. The child wasn't his, and the universe doesn't grant redemption that easily. She began writing letters at night, confessions never sent. Each page bled honesty she couldn't speak aloud. She wrote about the loneliness that drove her to that night, about the moment she lost control, about the fear that had taken root since. She wrote apologies to a man who didn't know he needed one. When she finished, she tore the letters apart and flushed them away, piece by piece, because even her confessions felt too dangerous to exist. The relief would last a few hours, and then the guilt would return, relentless, and full. Months passed. The world outside kept moving, but inside her, time had stalled. She began counting the days to her due date, not with excitement but dread. Ryan painted the nursery a soft color, his joy infectious, his hand steady. She watched him, and for a moment, wanted to believe she could start over, that love could erase the origin of sin. But love built on deception has an expiration date. Every kindness he showed was a reminder that she was building a future on borrowed truth. One evening, as they sat together watching the quiet fall of rain, Ryan rested his hand on her belly and whispered that he'd never been happier. Amara froze. The moment was pure, untouched by suspicion, and it shattered her. She wanted to tell him then, to end it before the lie grew any bigger. But her voice betrayed her again. She smiled through the tears, nodding silently as he wrapped his arm around her, completely unaware that the woman beside him was breaking from the inside out. When night came, sleep refused her. She stood by the window, watching lightning tear through the clouds, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. She pressed her palm against her stomach and whispered a truth no one would hear. This child, innocent and undeserving of shame, would live with a secret that might never be spoken. She wondered if silence was mercy or cowardice, and realized it didn't matter anymore. The choice had already been made when she decided to stay. The next morning, Ryan kissed her goodbye before leaving for work. She stood in the doorway long after he was gone, the quiet of the house echoing around her. Her eyes drifted toward the small drawer where the test still lay hidden, a reminder of the night her life divided in two. She didn't know what the future would hold, if the truth would ever surface, if the weight of it would crush her or somehow become bearable. But she understood now that there was no clean ending to betrayal. It doesn't fade or vanish, it settles, like dust in the air, unseen but always there. Amara took a deep breath and sat down, one hand over her belly, the other clutching her chest as if to hold herself together. The sound of the clock filled the silence, steady and cruel. Somewhere in that rhythm, she heard both punishment and purpose. She had made her choice, and life would continue, as it always does, with truths buried just deep enough to keep breathing.